Siemka, z tej strony Prosout, a to jest kolejny odcinek z Vampyr. Jak sobie pamiętacie, podróżowaliśmy sobie tutaj do Whitechapel. Pozwiedzaliśmy troszeczkę. Powiedzmy, że pozwiedzaliśmy. No i co, ja ogólnie zacznę już rozmawiać z tymi ludźmi. Miałem to zrobić jeszcze w tamtym odcinku. Ja akurat
Excuse me, sir.
miałem
Are you
dobre
familiar with
wyczucie
this part of town?
czas
Name's Clayton
Clayton?
Darby, reporter.
Sorry, I'm new to Whitechapel.
A nie, tamten miał Clay Cox.
Perhaps you could help me since you're a journalist. My name is Jonathan Reed.
Dr. Reed, the famous surgeon. I'll gladly help if I'm able, sir.
What is a journalist doing in this borough after sunset?
He goes where none of his colleagues would dare to go, to inform the country.
So you risk your life to reveal the truth. I saw many reporters do the same during the war.
Whitechapel is the crucible of so many untold stories and tragedies. I want people to know them.
Clayton chciałby, żeby gazety pisały prawdę o sytuacji w Whitechapel. Zostało nam 6 postaci, nie licząc Claytona, z którym gadamy teraz.
That's quite honorable of you. But is the public interested?
Not at all, sir. And that's why I'm an independent journalist, hoping to sell some stories.
Why are the newspapers keeping silent about the Spanish influenza? It's as though none of you care.
There's a war going on. People shouldn't be demoralized by news of deadly diseases.
I served in France. Our top priority must be to put an end to this butchery. This war must stop now.
Sir, streets are a battlefield too. An invisible and untold war is going on, and it must be stopped.
Have you any idea of the danger you face in these streets at night?
I've had to run and hide more than once from frenzied mobs incensed by the fever. Do you think the flu is really responsible for this, Doctor?
That science is unable to explain the facts doesn't mean there is no rational explanation.
I confess, I share your point of view, Doctor.
I heard you're investigating an underground medical dispensary in Whitechapel. What do you know about it?
Not much, I'm afraid. They are wary of strangers, and I'm not really an acquaintance of theirs.
I'm a doctor, Mr. Darby. I care about everything involving public health and this epidemic.
Are you sure you're not just concerned about the repercussions that a scandal involving a certain Nurse Crane from the Pembroke Hospital would bring?
Without a doubt, you are a damn fine journalist, Mr. Darby. What do you know of her accomplice, a man named Darius?
I don't know much about the man. He's very cautious, never goes out, doesn't seem to have any friends or family.
He has no relatives at all?
No, except for that strange man, a poet named Richard Nethercott, who sometimes comes by. Darius would never let him in.
Where can I find this Mr. Nethercott?
He spends most of his time lurking around Whitechapel, talking to himself or declaring verses. These days, you can usually find him behind the church.
He never goes out?
No. A few days ago, he unexpectedly did. I followed him, but it was just a ruse to keep me away from his house.
Really? How do you know?
He went to the nearest mailbox, but just before posting his letter, he ripped it up and threw it away.
Goodbye, Mr. Darby. Farewell.
Dobra. Znajdź skrzynkę pocztową i list.
Forgive my interruption.
Do not apologize, my son. Father Tobias Whitaker is always happy to teach mortals about the incoming Armageddon.
I am Dr. Jonathan Reed, and I just have a few questions.
A scientist? You are much more lost than I thought, my son.
Do you know Nurse Dorothy Crane from the Pembroke Hospital? I'd like to know more about her.
I don't like the liberal ideas of nurses, but I especially abhor that Nurse Crane you mentioned.
So, you're not exactly a fan of Florence Nightingale's work. But nurses are essential for modern healthcare.
Nuns should be the only women allowed to take care of male patients. It's obvious only they have the necessary moral fibre.
Why do you hate Nurse Crane more than other nurses?
Before coming to London, she was a member of the communist resistance in our country. That's what happens when you let a woman get involved in politics.
W swojej ojczyźnie Dorothy potajemnie działała w ruchu oporu.
What do you mean when you say that I am more lost than you thought?
All scientists are entangled in a world of causes and consequences, and most of them can't see the plain truth.
Quite a judgmental opinion, if you ask me. But what do I know? Blinded by science as I am.
But you are seeking answers, aren't you? Answers about the Armageddon about to strike the city. Answers about the hidden truth.
I no. Dobra.
I am. But the answers I seek are based on facts, not superstition. What do you mean when you say that I...
All
quite a...
But you...
On już to mówił.
Well, I suppose I can spare a few minutes listening to your so-called truth.
As a doctor, you must be aware of the decimating epidemic. But let me tell you that this so-called Spanish flu is just the beginning of the end.
What do you mean?
The beast is finally revealing itself, corrupting the flesh and the heart of men. With my own eyes I have seen them, those minions from the abyss.
Really? And what would be your answer to this biblical threat?
We must fight the disease before this legion outnumbers us. But not with scalpels and microscopes. No.
What is left then?
Cleansing fire.
Tell me, Tobias, what exactly is your plan concerning the cleansing of this city?
God will recognize his own. More than once this city has risen from the ashes, hardened and purified by the flames.
Purification by fire has proved useful, but where do you stop? Burn the clothes? The buildings? The corpses? Worse?
Your lack of faith is predictable. But my task is to convince rational minds like yours to see the light. This is God's will.
You're mad and dangerous. You're nothing but a soulless butcher. A small-time Torquemada. The Savonarola of Whitechapel.
My son, if you think salvation is a free gift, go listen to the lies of that pompous fool, Joseph.
Joseph, a fool?
Vicar Larrabee of St. Mary's Church. While he continues preaching his fraudulent redemption, more and more people die in the streets.
Tobias chce ogniem walczyć z epidemią. Tobias jest zdania, że pastor Kościoła Świętej Maryi głosi fałszywą wiarę.
Have you any friends? Any family left in these terrible times?
No. But I have a disciple I see as my son. He is so devoted. I sent him to preach the good word in the heart of this corrupted city.
Where did you send him?
I sent Samuel to the Stonebridge Cemetery, where the pestilence and evil
Gdzie
grows night after
Czy są
night.
kreskowane? M? Czekajcie, wpiszę to w Google. Kurwa. Mur. Niby jest coś takiego w słowniku. Groźna choroba zakaźna, zaraza wyniszczająca bydło lub trzodę. Macie teraz, podałem wam właśnie po definicję pojęcia mur przez ukreskowane.
You sent him on some preaching crusade during the epidemic.
As a true believer, Samuel will fear no evil while he walks through the valley of the shadow of death.
I have heard enough for tonight. Goodbye.
Go odbije.
Soon the time will come when you will all be judged for your sins.
You again?
Have you heard of a nurse named...
Dorothy Crane? Yeah, I know her. One of the few good souls who dare to help the sick around here.
Could you please tell me more about her?
She's a nice girl. Tries to help the migrants. I offered to give her a hand, but she said my reputation would attract too much attention.
According to you, physicians are scarce in this part of town. Why is that?
Not familiar with this neighbourhood, are you? I guess your fancy colleagues are too afraid of being stabbed in the back.
This part of town does have quite a reputation. Would you say it's justified?
Totally. Look at me, for instance. I always look my opponent in the eye before knocking him out.
May I ask what you do around here?
I do whatever I want, and sometimes even more. Now sod off.
Why do you keep on working for the gang, Joe? You know it doesn't suit you.
It's true, I hate this job. And I know I made some bad choices, but I'm a wet boot boy now, and people won't forget it.
You could leave tomorrow. Start another life in another town.
That's easy for you to say, Doctor. We are poor. My son's weak, and there's no way he'll endure another disappointment.
Dobra. Już nic
Goodbye,
nie ma
Mr.
więcej.
Welcome, sir. Please, take a browse of my wares.
I am Dr. Reed. I would like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind.
Doctor? Interesting. I'm Barrett Lewis. Usually I don't have time to waste with talk, but at this hour of the night I can hardly refuse.
Okej.
Have you heard of a nurse called Dorothy Crane?
Nurse Crane. So the bitch really is a nurse, then? Always thought she was just some crafty foreigner, that one.
So she's trying to help her fellow immigrants. Why would that make her a villain?
Dorothy Crane ain't even a real name. Something like Dorothea Craniu. Something like that. Came to England fleeing the war, I was told.
That doesn't explain why she irritates you so much.
Your precious Nurse Crane gives away medical supplies and prescriptions for free. I offered to sell it for a fair cut, but no. Miss Crane wanted to play the quiet saint.
Swojej ojczyźnie... A, dobra. Dorothy rozdaje darmowe lekarstwa.
How is business around here?
Business? I have no business. Between this racket, theft, and customers getting scared, I'm losing money every day.
I see. Sounds like you blame someone in particular for your situation.
It's no secret Joe Peterson spends his time harassing merchants. But with me, he's trying to put me out of business once and for all.
Dobra. Ze względu na wyłudzenia uskuteczniane przez Joe'ego Beret znajduje się w złej sytuacji finansowej.
As a merchant, you see Whitechapel every day. Have you noticed anything out of the ordinary recently?
Well, you mean besides the epidemic, the war, and all the usual crap? As long as I can remember, this part of town has been a bottomless pit, and no sign of the bottom yet.
Chwila.
Violence is increasing in the borough.
Yeah. A few nights ago, some blokes jumped me. Came out of one of the condemned workshops. Fever, madness, something like that.
Where did this happen? Why did you go there?
In the closed workshops nearby. I worked there as an apprentice in better days. Now I only go to find trinkets or tools. Too bad I was mugged, though. There was good money in that little box of loot I lost.
Tak myślałem, że będzie nowe śledztwo.
Have you been hurt?
No, but that's only because I ran like hell. Those men were raving lunatics, I tell you. Not even able to speak anymore, just screaming.
Right then. Show me what you have.
Pokupowałbym te zwyczajne uchwyty. Kurwa, jakie to jest drogie. Jakie mam cokolwiek ulepszyć, jak to wszystko jest takim gównem? Kurwa, 72 winiane żelazo. Już mam 1000 pedeków. Wydałbym to chętnie na ten... na ostateczność.
Don't be shy, handsome. What can Christina do for you?
I'm not looking for what you're selling. But I'd like to ask you a few questions, if I may. I'm a doctor. Dr. Reed.
All right then, but be quick, though I usually get paid when I open my mouth.
Do you know Nurse Dorothy Crane from the Pembroke Hospital? Anything you can tell me about her would be helpful.
I don't know her, but I know her name is Dorothea Crane. She came from Romania like me and many others.
You seem to respect her.
Dorothea helps the sick people of Whitechapel. Everyone should respect that.
Christina, have you been examined? The epidemic is spreading fast in London, and you could be exposed, or expose others.
I don't like doctors or hospitals, but I don't like you asking questions.
Chwila.
Considering your line of work, I assure you it is only a matter of time before you have health issues.
If it is going to happen, it will happen. Right now, I need money. That's what's important.
You can put your own life in danger, that's your decision. But what about your clients? If you're contaminated, you will put them in danger too.
And you think that would worry me? If you knew the men I deal with, their health would not be what you'd worry about.
Clayton Darby claims he will expose the crisis in Whitechapel to all of London. Do you believe him?
I believe Clayton's courage will erode with time, until he finally leaves Whitechapel to start another fight somewhere else.
Why this skepticism?
How can you speak about starvation if you've never been hungry? Or about poverty? Or anything else you have never suffered from?
Are you talking from experience?
I've seen your type come here to get a good fuck in a cheap room or a dark alley before going back to their fancy houses in the West End.
Tell me about yourself.
Are you joking with me? People don't usually come to see me for conversation.
I have no interest in your work. I am, however, curious as to what led you into this career.
Short story. The war, exile, and England. This country is not especially welcoming. I've been refused many jobs because of where I am from. I had few options left.
Nie chcę zatrudnić Krystyny, ponieważ jest imigrantką. Ona się z kimś łączy w ogóle. Z Claytonem? Lol.
I always thought I was the master of my own fate. But now I know we don't always have control over our lives. I don't judge you.
You know, this money is not only for me. I have good reasons to need this money quickly, but it is not your concern, Doctor.
Goodbye, miss. Take care of yourself as best you can.
Pogadajmy z Joe'em, bo czegoś się tam dowiedzieliśmy. O właśnie.
How did you become the local bully everyone is afraid of, Joe?
There's no pride in roughing up poor bastards. But this is the only job I found. And it pays well, too.
A job? So you're racketeering for someone else?
I got enlisted by the Wet Boot Boys, a gang from the docks. I'm their muscle for their dirty work.
Most people don't become thugs when unemployed. This is a choice you made.
I don't care what you think, sir. I do what I have to do for my own reasons, and that's that.
I'm not sure Mr. Lewis would agree with your by all means necessary philosophy, sir.
Oh, do you really think he's the poor victim here? Barrett can be as sneaky as anyone. Long ago, I even called the bastard my best friend.
Joe i Barrett Lewis byli niegdyś dobrymi przyjaciółmi. Ze względu na reputację kryminalisty Joe nie może znaleźć pracy. Joe wyłudzeniami sprawił, że Barrett Lewis znalazł się w złej sytuacji finansowej. To samo.
Goodbye, Mr. Peterson.
O, aż 40 PD dostałem za coś takiego. Fajnie. Łączę sobie ten zmysł. Kamelia. Jeszcze z nią nie gadałem.
Good evening, miss. I'm Dr. Reed. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I know what you're thinking. A tall stranger who meets a girl in the street at night. It reeks of the penny dreadfuls. But I mean you no harm, truly.
Co nie mówiąca w ogóle?
I know you understand what I'm saying. Your silence has nothing to do with you being mute, does it? Melia, I know you work for Dorothy Crane. Please tell me about her secret dispensary. A stubborn and mute comrade. Nurse Crane and Darius Petrescu have been clever.
Ona pewnie nie może mówić.
Very well. Goodbye then.
Jesus, ale ty jesteś uparty. Osioł, nawet nie. Kolejny kupon na badanie lekarskie. Super. Hał, no. Srał, pies cię srał.
It's locked.
No, jakiś nieznany. Kwarantanna grypa, nie zbliżać się. O, a jak w Polsce jest koronawirus, to Wszyscy w kościołach się zlatują, bo przecież Bóg ich ochroni. No jak czytałem właśnie, o Jezu, list do Dariusa Petresku. Najdroższe umiłowane dzieci, przepraszam, że nie skontaktowałem się z wami od kilku miesięcy. Sytuacja w Londynie była skomplikowana. Wiem, że zabrzmi to egoistycznie i głupio, jako że nadal żyjecie w kraju pochłoniętym wojną, lecz tu, w Anglii również toczy się wojna. Z biedą i niesprawiedliwością. To bój, w którym zamierzam brać udział. Nie bacząc na swój podeszły wiek, stąd mój list. Nie wrócę do Rumunii. To oznacza, że najpewniej nie zobaczę was przed śmiercią. Nie smućcie się, dziadki. Dziadki. Może to jest specjalnie napisane. Jesteście już dorosłe i macie własne dzieci. Wiecie, że czasami trzeba wiele poświęcić, żeby uczynić świat lepszym. Ja muszę ponieść ofiarę, żeby raz jeszcze poczuć się pożyteczny. Żyjcie długo i szczęśliwie. Ucałujcie ode mnie wnuki i pamiętajcie, że ojciec śle wam miłość z tego dalekiego, zimnego kraju. Na zawsze kochający ojciec.
The content of Darius' letter to his children could give me more leverage to enter.
W ogóle miałem znaleźć skrzynkę pocztową. To niezła skrzynka pocztowa. BTW. Co jest z tym kablem? Samo obkręcająca się kamera. Właśnie mówiąc, niby tutaj kwarantanna, bo jest grypa, a ludzie się kurwa zbiegają, nie? W Polsce bynajmniej. Ludzie piszą, że tak, że Bóg ich ochroni. Ja jak przeczytałem, to myślę, że się zesram, ale jednocześnie taki cringe mnie złapał, że no naprawdę. Nie mogę ich podsłuchać. Cadogan tu jest. Petresku. A tu co? O Jezu. To już mi wszystko boli. Curfew. Curfew to jest godzina policyjna. Nie chcę wrogów. Ja pierdolę, to jest egzekutor? Ewidentnie ja tam nie chcę już wracać. Dobra, muszę jeszcze Richarda Nittercota znaleźć.
Cheap price, good quality. Come on, take a look. Don't be afraid.
Nie było skalów czasami? Jezu, to jest jeszcze ta wielka bestia. Jezu, nie chciałem tego. Kurde, ja sobie teraz umrę przez tą wielką bestię, bo nie mam kurwa gdzie wytworzyć pierdół. A czy jest sens w ogóle schodzić tutaj? Czekajcie. Może dam radę go ominąć? Dobra. Nie, idź mi stąd. Cokolwiek ode mnie chcesz, idź stąd. Jezus kochany, idź stąd! Jezu, no nie chciałem z nim walczyć, no. Taki fajny, puszysty. Tak, fajny, puszysty, no. Przypomniało mi się, jak do niego w tamtym odcinku się... No i chuj. Teraz się zrespią wrogowie od nowa. No mówiłem. Dobra, idę inną drogą chyba.
Joe,
Była taka
please, I
droga,
don't
gdzie
have
mogę
your
ten...
money.
Come on, Barrett, you know the game. You pay for peace of mind.
Nie. Muszę iść tędy, no. Ja nie sprawdzam tych plakatów na ścianach. Nie wiem, po co to w ogóle jest.
This district seems to get uglier every year.
No wypierdalaj! Wow. Środka z pigułkami, fajnie. Jezu kochany! Trzoskalowie! Zapomniałem. A, tu mi odzyskuje zdrowie, Jezu, zapomniałem. No, hałku. Jezu, nie mam... Aj. Dobra, si. Aha. Aha. Tu nic nie ma. Kurwa, nic nie ma. No do kurwy nędzy, no. Aha, tu jest przejście jakieś.
This could be the box Lewis thought he locked.
Aha. Barecie, nie mam pojęcia jak to ująć inaczej, więc napiszę wprost. To nie może dłużej trwać, przynajmniej z mojej strony. Jeśli Joe kiedykolwiek się o nas dowie, o swojej żonie i najlepszym przyjacielu, załamie się, a potem cię zabije. Przeżyliśmy razem kilka pięknych chwil, ale pora spojrzeć prawdzie w oczy. Nigdy nie zostanę Jane Lewis. Ty to wiesz i ja to wiem. Kładę zatem wszystkiemu kres tu i teraz. Jeżeli zgadzasz się z moją decyzją, na pewno w końcu znowu będziemy szczęśliwi. Ty, Joe i ja. I dzięki temu zachowamy najważniejszą część naszej historii. Jednak zanim ten dzień nadejdzie, proszę cię o przebaczenie. Żegnaj na jakiś czas, Jane.
A love letter from Joe Peterson's wife addressed to Barrett Lewis. Who should I give it to, I wonder?
Kurwa, naprawdę nie mam pojęcia, jak ja mam się tam dostać. Opowie mi ktoś, bo ja tu nie widzę przejścia w ogóle. Chociaż... muszę, kurwa, wrócić praktycznie. Stąd spierdolić. O! To jest gdzieś przy kościele. Tutaj.
Can't you just look the other way this week, Joe? Come on, we
właśnie.
can sort it out, right?
It's not my call, Barrett. You paid one.
Fancy buying something, sir?
You never lose your focus, do you?
O,
I found this box in an abandoned building nearby. I believe it belongs to you.
Let's have a look. Yeah, this is mine. So, you faced those loons that roam around there. Extraordinary.
I suppose I was lucky.
Luck is a commodity round here. Yours should be properly rewarded.
About this package,
o!
it's not just tools and trinkets, is it?
I want to be rude or anything after your kind gesture, but it's none of your business.
Nie moja sprawa. I tak się spytam.
Joe Peterson, he's the villain here, isn't he? But you seem to know each other.
I've known Joe for years. I saw him box once or twice. He was a friend then. But these days, he's just another thug.
What can you tell me about Mr. Peterson? Besides his behavior toward you,
Colossus Joe was a decent boxer, good one even. But after his wife passed away, he found every excuse to stop training. Just wanted to pick fights with everyone.
It's never easy to find a new path in life, especially after the loss of a loved one. But crime is certainly not the best option.
We've all had some rough times, ain't we? But most of us don't use our fists to see us through.
And no one has ever stood up to this thug.
Nobody will be fool enough to stand against a wet boot boy.
Barrett, you had an affair with Joe's wife, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. She's the only woman I loved. My first regret is that she stayed with Joe after Harry was born. The second is I never shed a tear when she died.
Did you ever try talking to Joe?
Never. But I suspected he knew everything, even without knowing it. And he decided to make me pay in his own way.
Do you mean you're Harry's father?
No one will ever know for sure. And it's better that way. And I don't believe I'd have been all that bad as a dad.
Goodbye for now, Mr. Lewis.